Hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer and I thought I would start a new reading vlog today. It's been a while, I'm feeling a little ropey, I'm recovering from COVID and I've been quite sick. It's taken me a while to get better, one, because my body is complicated, and two, how does one rest and recover when one has to look after a 1-year-old? Asking for a friend. It is Booker Prize season. The Booker Prize has very kindly sent me, gosh, it's a heavy box. A big box of books, the 13 books that have been longlisted. By the time you're seeing this video, because I like to do one epically long reading vlog as opposed to lots of different videos, because I don't want to, there's a lot of content, I think is what I'm saying out there. There's a lot of content about the Booker Prize and I don't want to overwhelm you. I just like doing the one video, but it's epically long. And by the time I finish reading all the books, which is my aim, you'll probably already be very aware of what's on the long list. But at this moment, as I'm filming this, I don't know. So indulge me for a second. I did do a predictions. I posted that over on Patreon, which is linked in the description if you happen to be interested. It was just a list of 13 books that I thought could possibly be on the list. I didn't do any really deep thinking about it, just a bit of fun. But before I open this book, shall we have a look at what I guessed? I tend to have a hit rate of 1 per year, so I tend to guess 1 book. But my guesses were The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. I loved her first book, which was longlisted for the prize, in 2022. Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. The Book of Records by Madeleine Tien. Audition by Katie Kitamura. I haven't read most of these actually. This is just going on vibes mostly. Juice by Tim Winton. Harriet Tubman Live in Concert by Bob the Drag Queen. I would love if that was longlisted, mainly because I would like to read it, but also I just think that'd be fabulous. Anyway, Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell, 3 Days in June by Anne Tyler, Helm by Sarah Hall, A Room Above the Shop by Anthony Shapland, Albion by Anna Hope, Deviance by Santanu Bhattacharya, Will There Ever Be Another You by Patricia Lockwood. Those are my guesses. Actually, the only one out of those that I've read is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. But as I said, going on other people's reviews, whatever, just a bit of fun. Let's see how many I guessed correctly / really didn't guess at all. Okay, so inside this box, we've got a picture of the long list on the back of this, so I'm just going to hide that from myself. But we've got a note from the chair of the judges, Roddy Doyle, who says that it wasn't easy to pick these books. At times it was agony, but I loved every minute of the experience. There are novels that experiment with form and others that do so less obviously. Some of them examine the past and others poke at our shaky presence. They are all alive with great characters and narrative surprises. All somehow examine identity, individual or national, and all, I think, are gripping and excellent. We hope you agree. Happy reading. All best wishes from the Booker Prize Foundation. Okay, right, these are presumably not going to be in any order, and I am not going to know probably much about each of them. Well, we'll see, maybe there will be some I do know quite a bit about. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail in this section, because obviously throughout this video I'm going to be reading them all and talking to you about them, and we'll talk about them then. Oh, okay, so we've got a Fitzcarraldo. I don't think they have ever been longlisted for the Booker Prize before. This is exciting. They often are on the International Booker long list, but as a publisher I don't think that they have been nominated for the main, do we call it the main? I'm going to call it the main Booker Prize before. Okay, so we've got One Boat by Jonathan Buckley. Before we actually start, can I just say, you can normally tell how well things are going for me by how chipped my nail varnish is. And I don't know if you can see, but yeah, I mean, some nails don't even have nail varnish on anymore. That's where we're at right now. So this is One Boat by Jonathan Buckley, and this is about a woman called Teresa who returns to a small town on the Greek coast after losing her father, the same place she visited when grieving her mother 9 years ago. So that's that one. Okay, then we've got a book published by Daunt Books, which is exciting. I love the things that they do. They were on the long list last year with Rita Bullwinkle, who actually has a quote on the back of this, who says it is an emotional thriller. Sign me up for a thriller, yes please. I didn't say what this is. This is Misinterpretation by Ledia Xhoga, and this is about an Albanian interpreter living in New York City. Do I want to know more than that? No. Not if it's a thriller, I don't. So, okay, excellent. Oh, okay, next we have The South by Tash Aw. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, this is the first in a series. I always want to say quartet after Alice Smith's quartet. So if that was a seasonal quartet, is this going to be a geographical quartet? Have we got north, east and west coming? I don't know. Okay, but hopefully this stands on its own 2 feet. This is a novel about the longings that bloom between 2 boys over the course of one summer, about family, desire and what we inherit. Okay, lovely. Right, next we have, a book by David Szalay. He was very well respected, but I have never read anything by him. This is called Flesh, and we have a quote on the front by last year's Booker Prize winner, Samantha Harvey. This is about a 15-year-old boy who lives with his mother in a quiet apartment complex in Hungary. New to the town and shy, he is unfamiliar with the social rituals at school and soon becomes isolated. It's a hypnotic novel about a man who is unravelled by a series of events beyond his grasp. Okay, then we have Seascraper by Benjamin Wood. I've heard about this one. I think this is about a man who works on the Thames, but he wants to be a musician. I think that's correct. Let me just double check this blurb. Oh, I don't know if it's the Thames, but he works on a river anyway. And yes, he does want to be a musician. So yes, I don't want to know more about that because it is a tiny book. Maybe this will be the shortest one. It's just over, well, it's 160-ish pages. We love a short book. This is not a short book. Look at that. Oh my goodness. And it's got small font. All right, so this is The Loneliness of Sonia and Sonny by Kiran Desai, who won the Booker Prize 20 years ago, I want to say. Yeah, 20 years ago. And I think this is their first book since then. Oh my goodness, look at that. At least it's floppy. We love a floppy book. Oh, it's got a family tree at the front. Do we like that? Sometimes I like that and sometimes I feel a bit threatened by it. Okay, it says a spellbinding story of 2 young people whose fates intersect and diverge across continents and years, an epic of love and family, India and America, tradition and modernity, etc, etc, etc. Okay, an epic love story across continents. Okay, next up we have, Love Forms by Claire Adam. Now, Claire Adam, I did read her debut and I didn't get on with it, and I was really excited to read it because it was the second book published by Sarah Jessica Parker's imprint in America, though over here it's published by Faber. And I loved the first one that she published, which was A Place for Us by Fatemeh Fahim-Mirza, which I've spoken about a lot on this channel. I think that came out in 2018, and I did chuckle to myself when the internet, some parts of the internet, got quite cross that Sarah Jessica Parker is one of the judges for the Booker Prize this year. She reads so much. She has always been championing books and has her own, publishing imprint. And in 2018, I interviewed her about her love of books and about Fatemeh Fahim-Mirza, and it was just lovely. And if you would like to listen to that podcast, I'm sure, well, I'm guessing it's still available. I will link it in the description box down below. Anyway, I didn't end up loving Claire Adams' first book as much, but maybe I will love this one. She is from Trinidad. This is set in Trinidad. It's set in 1980. And it's about someone called Dawn who, aged 16, leaves her home and journeys across the sea to Venezuela. There she gives birth to a baby girl and leaves her with nuns to be given up for adoption. I want to know no more than that. Thank you very much. Okay, we're about halfway through and I have guessed none of these books so far. All right, we've got Andrew Miller. This is The Land in Winter. This is about 2 couples in the English countryside. I think one couple live on a farm. It's about a blizzard. It says, where do you hide when you can't leave home, and where in a frozen world can you run to? It's set in December 1962. Then we have got The Rest of Our Lives by Ben Markovits. Ben used to be, I would say, our best customer when I ran an antiquarian bookshop in North London for many years. He used to come in all the time, but I have never read a book by him, which is very naughty, so we'll be rectifying that in this video. This is about a man going through a midlife crisis, and then I think he goes on some kind of road trip. Yes, okay, that sounds fun. Then we've got Natasha Brown. Okay, now I read her first book, which was my goodness, why is the name of that escaped me? Assembly. I read Assembly and I liked it, but I honestly didn't really get the hype. That book was everywhere, everyone was falling over themselves loving it, and I just was a little perplexed. I thought it was okay, so I hope that I enjoy this one more. This is, I think, told from lots of different points of view, and it's about someone who's killed after they've been hit over the head with this gold block here, and it's about truth, or questioning what truth is. Okay, then we have got, I've still not guessed any of these books yet. This is quite hilarious. Susan Choi's Flashlight. I know nothing about this one. Ooh, it's set in Japan. It is about the disappearance of Louise's father. She'd been walking with him on a beach and she wakes up and her father is gone. And it's about them exploring that. It says a thrilling, globe-spanning novel that mines questions of memory, language, identity and family. It's another big one. There are some big ones on this list. Oh look, it's one I guessed. How exciting. This is Audition by Katie Kitamura. I haven't read this one. I've heard it's quite experimental. One woman, the performance of a lifetime or two. An exhilarating, destabilizing novel that asks whether we ever really know the people we love. Two people meet for lunch in a Manhattan restaurant. She's an accomplished actress in rehearsals for an upcoming premiere. He's attractive, troubling, young enough to be her son. Who is he to her and who is she to him? Okay, a short one. Nice. And then finally, oh, Endling. Okay. This is about, I think this is another road trip novel, and I believe that it's about a group of women and a snail that is the last of its kind. I also think, wasn't there a novel that came out around the same time that had a very similar premise, which is extraordinary given how specific it is, you know, a snail that's the last of its kind. An unforgettable debut novel about the journey of three women and one extremely endangered snail through contemporary Ukraine. There we go. All right, okay. I don't want to know more than that because, as I said, I'm going to be reading all of these in this video and talking to you about them. Now, my time is limited, much more limited than it used to be, because I'm looking after a child now and trying to slot work in around nap times and just general existence. So I will be quite cutthroat. I will be giving each of these books a very good chance. I mean, I said this last year and I finished most of the books last year, I think. So it's not as if I'm just going to be sampling them. I am going to be reading them. I just mean if I'm really not enjoying something, I'm going to put it to one side and say, okay, thank you, see you later. So I look forward to chatting to you about these books over the coming weeks. The shortlist is announced, I want to say, towards the end of September. So I would like to have finished reading the entire long list before that point. Okay, that's all I have to say right now because I haven't read anything yet. So I will come back and talk to you when I've read something and we can chat about that, or rather I can chat to you about that, because I'm talking to a camera and then you can leave a comment in the comment section, because that's how this works. I've been doing this 10 years. I feel very rusty. Hopefully the brain fog will lift soon and we can have some quality literary discussion. Okay, right, I'll see you soon. Goodbye. Hi, it's a little while later and I'm here to check in with you. I have read 2 books and as I hope you can tell, I'm also feeling much, much better. Praise be, because that took a while. Today's excellent roadside find. That makes it sound like I pick up stuff by the side of the road all the time. And I don't, but we found a great roadside find today. Someone was getting rid of a Brio train set. Now, I didn't realise how coveted they were. I just saw it was a wooden train set and thought, that looks cute. And then I sent a picture of it to my mum and she said, is that a Brio train set? And I was like, yes. Apparently, that's really good. So yeah, someone was getting rid of it outside their house, said it was free to take, so we took it. And I'm not sure who's going to be playing with it more, us or our daughter. Probably us. Already had great fun setting it up downstairs. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. But I thought I would insert some kind of like life chats in between the book chats, because if you know, you've been here a while, you know that I used to film reading vlogs where there would be quite a lot of beef footage and chat in between the book chat. I'd take you on walks, we'd do some cooking, and I'm just not in that phase of life at the moment because everything in the house is kind of child related and I'm snatching moments to film. So I'm making the book vlogs more book focused, and I would like to get back to filming out and about and all that in the future, but it probably will be a while. So I'm just going to inject some like little life anecdotes along the way, because I know that some of you enjoy that. So there we go. That's the life anecdote of today. A Brio train set. Hooray. Okay, right. I have read 2 books. I have no rhyme or reason to which ones I'm reading first. I'm just picking up whichever ones I fancy in that particular moment. The only one I do know I'll be reading last is the Sunny and Sonia book, because I have posted that to Ben over at Ben Reads Good. I will link his channel in the description box down below if you don't already follow him. He didn't have a copy of that because it's not out until the end of September. So I've sent him my copy and he will send it back to me by the end of August, and then I can crack on with reading that, probably finally. And to be honest, leaving the biggest one until last is fine too, because it's going to feel motivating to get through books. Having said that, the ones I've read so far are not the shortest of the bunch. So let's talk about them. I read Flesh by David Szalay. As I said in the beginning of this video, I have never read books by him before. I'm not sure I will again, just as a spoiler for how I felt about this book. It's not as if I really didn't like the book, I just didn't feel particularly attached to it. What's it about, Jen? This is about a man, we start with him as a teenager, called Istvan. He lives in Hungary with his mum. I found the beginning of this book the most interesting part. And that's not really how you want to feel about a novel. You want to feel like it's building and building into something brilliant. But yes, at the very beginning, Istvan is coerced into entering into a sexual relationship with an older woman who he's been helping out, doing her shopping and things like that. And it's very clear to the reader, or at least I feel it's very clear to the reader, that this is abuse. But Istvan in the moment doesn't see that. But this taking away of his agency impacts all of his life, and we see that as we read on, following him throughout the decades as he moves from Hungary to the UK. And we do a lot of time jumping, so we'll be plonked down in a certain year with him, and then we'll be drip fed backstory. And I did like how that was executed. It didn't really feel like exposition. And I think at the beginning we're really being asked how we would feel if the gender roles had been reversed in this exploitation of power. And I think that's a very valid question to ask. This is a book that explores masculinity. I think the overall feeling I had about it was, yes, it's exploring masculinity and emotional detachment and not discussing feelings, but I didn't really know what new things it was adding to that conversation. And it ended up feeling quite frustrating. Some of that frustration is definitely orchestrated by the author, who is refusing to let you get close to these characters. But because of that, it meant I was always acutely aware that I was reading a novel. So I'm not sure if that makes it successful or not. The way I felt about Istvan was like I was watching a video game. Not a video game that I was playing, but watching a play-by-play of somebody else play a video game, someone I couldn't see, who was telling Istvan as a character, right, you need to go talk to that person, or that person, you should do this particular thing. And I think that was also reflected in the really stilted conversations he would have with people, those awkward one-on-ones you might have in a video game where it takes a while for the person to reply to you because the game is, you know, refreshing or whatever, or has lost connection to the internet and needs to reboot. The title of the book tells us that that's what this is going to be. Flesh. We are seeing the surface of this person. We are seeing the base instincts of this person. We are not getting under the surface very often at all. Which isn't to say the book didn't move me in parts. It did, in a very warped way. It reminded me a lot of Stoner by John Williams, which to some people, dare I say most people, would be high praise, because I know that so many people absolutely adore this book, and there are few books that I detest more than Stoner. So if you enjoy Stoner, then I think you will enjoy Flesh by David Szalay. It's written simply, it's bleak, and to go back to that computer game imagery, there are various parts where Istvan seems to do things like big life things in a very nonchalant, well, I'll just try this kind of way, as if if he doesn't like it and it doesn't work out, he can go back a level, he can do a redo, he can start again, and then he'll have a moment where he realises, oh no, wait, I can't do that because this is my actual life. At various points, I thought the book reminded me of Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which again, for many people will be very high praise, perhaps because this book ends up feeling Dickensian, and obviously that's a riff on Dickens, so that would make sense. There's some very obvious imagery in this book though, which made me a little bit annoyed, quite frankly. So at one point, a character gets something in their eye and asks for eye drops. So a character then goes and gets eye drops for them. And when they use the eye drops and they can finally see again, they notice something that lets them reveal a character's secret. And I thought, really? We're saying that when they can see, they can see? I just would have liked something maybe a little bit more imaginative. So those are my thoughts on Flesh. I mean, obviously lots of people love it. It's been longlisted for the Booker. Brilliance on every page, says Samantha Harvey, who won the Booker last year. And on the back it says, it's brilliant and wise, compelling and elegant. This one just didn't wow me. After reading that, I decided to read Flashlight by Susan Choi. This is a book that I enjoyed. I don't have a huge amount to say about it, and I think that's because it really heavily reminded me of a book that I read last year that I loved even more than this. I think if you can link a book with another that you have already read, it lessens your enjoyment of this one because you're always comparing it to something that you think is marginally better. So the book that I would compare this to is River East, River West by Aubrey Lescure, which was my favourite book from last year's Women's Prize longlist. Still haven't got over the fact that it was not shortlisted. That is a book narrated by a teenager who's talking about how her American mother is marrying their Chinese landlord, and there's lots of discussions about China and America and about capitalism and communism and secrets in families, and also sometimes actually secret families in that book, and it's gorgeous. You then follow the stepfather's perspective and you follow his life throughout the decades before he met the stepdaughter's mother, and it's just so moving, and I sobbed so many times reading that book. This one is about a character called Louisa, and at the beginning we join her. She's woken up on a beach. She had been out walking with her father, and her father is presumed drowned. We then follow Louisa's life and her father's life, Cirque, and her mother's life, and again we're looking at family secrets. In this case, it is not a discussion between America and China, but between America and Korea and Japan, because her dad, Cirque, well, his family were Korean, but he was brought up in Japan. There are also discussions in here, massive discussions to do with capitalism and communism, identity, and yeah, covering very similar ground to River East, River West. And I just think that book is executed in a better way. I could not help but compare the two and found this one slightly lacking. Regarding the title, there's repeated imagery throughout this book of using a flashlight to look for truth, for ghosts, for secrets, and then sometimes wishing that you hadn't done that thing. Without getting into spoiler territory with this book, I would say that it genre-wise became something I wasn't particularly expecting. It becomes a little bit of a thriller towards the end, which was quite exciting. Structurally, I think the middle of this book is saggy. It could be cut. There were scenes that I didn't really feel added much to the rest of the text. There's also a character in here called Tobias who I just did not believe as a person, and I wasn't sure if that was particularly the point because none of the characters seem to truly know him. He's always been on the outskirts of their lives, so perhaps we were supposed to see him as this eccentric, unbelievable person because he's never fully realised to any of the people in this book. There's some really good disability representation in this book actually. Anne becomes disabled in her later life. That is Louisa's mother, and I thought that that was handled really, really well. Some parts of the book I found a little boring and I had to really slog my way through. It's an interrogation of truth, asking if we can really truly know someone, and as I said, it has massive similarities to River East, River West, but also there are elements of things like The Bee Sting by Paul Murray or The Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. So if you were a fan of those books, I would suggest picking this one up. I don't think, or at least I hope, it's not going to be near my top of all of these books, because I do think that the book is flawed, but I enjoyed reading it, spending time with these characters, and I was deeply moved in parts if I happen to be frustrated in others. Hi, I come to you from the sofa today for a change, and also I realised, because I just edited the last clip, I didn't say goodbye. I just stopped talking at the end of my review of Flashlight, which is a little bit rude, so sorry for the abruptness of that transition there. Just got back from a lovely walk on Hampstead Heath, feeding the ducks. Here is a little bit of footage of the pond, I think, looking nearly autumnal. In fact, I have a flannel shirt on, as you can see. The weather is cooling. I am thrilled by it. Yes, I have 3 more books to talk to you about today, but I just wanted to quickly mention something that has tickled me. I have received, I would say, nearly 100 messages now from you guys letting me know about a game, a Nintendo Switch game, I think it's a Switch game anyway, called Tiny Bookshop, where you can run a mobile bookshop and you can recommend books to people. That is the game. That is what you were doing as a bookseller. And apparently one of my books, the Bookshop Book, is a book you can recommend to people in the game. So I've been sent lots of screenshots of the Bookshop Book being recommended. And I just thought that was quite cool. If you haven't come across that book before and you are intrigued by that, it is a book I wrote over 10 years ago now. That's a long time ago, about 300 weird and wonderful bookshops around the world, bookshop towns and travelling bookshops, and I had a fun time writing it. So it's lovely that it's in this cosy little game, and thank you to those of you who have messaged me and told me about it. Anyway, right, 3 books to talk about. Let's talk about this one first, which is The South by Tash Aw, and is definitely the book I've enjoyed least out of this list so far. This is a book that is the first in a series, the first of 4, and ultimately I just didn't feel like this book was a whole story. It felt very much like a beginning, and I just didn't feel like it was enough to stand on its own 2 feet to warrant being in a list like this, because books that are nominated for prizes have to be something that rely only on themselves and no other material surrounding it, which I guess is a discussion for another day, because we can talk about intertextuality and retellings and all of that, but we're talking about this book. I didn't feel like it was substantial enough, didn't give me enough to personally warrant being on this or any Booker Prize longlist, which was a shame, because I think there are some interesting things about it, so let's delve into those. This is a book that begins in the middle, so we start with Jay and Chuan, the 2 main characters of this book. We open with a sex scene between the 2 of them, and then we go back and work out how we get to that point. So it's, I guess, a pretty standard literary device to do that, to either start at the middle or the end and then work your way backwards, going towards that scene. It means that there is an inevitability to the characters' actions, and everything about this book feels a little predetermined, not only because we start in the middle, but also because it's being narrated by Jay when he is much older. So it's written in the 3rd person, but he will occasionally interject and use I to explain something to the reader, or to say, I don't actually remember too much about this scene. And he actually does include scenes between characters that he never witnessed, not that he dissects that in any way in the book itself. Does that make him an unreliable narrator? Yes, but does it come with the connotations that that would imply? Is he manipulating you in a bad way, or is he just trying to understand himself and his life and the people around him? Is this a kind of, I don't know, catharsis, a healing process? Possibly. Yeah, so that again was interesting to think about, but overall I just found the book a little bit lacking. Next, I read The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, which is a novel that moved me a lot. It is set in the 1960s in the English countryside, and it's about 2 couples, mostly. One of the couples has a husband who is a farmer, the other has a husband who is a doctor, and both wives in these couples are pregnant. That sounded like a very weird way of describing the book, but anyway, that's what the book is. That is the premise. Those are the characters. We are following their lives over the course of this winter, and how their paths or journeys do or do not intersect with each other. They live very nearby. They can see each other across the fields, and it's whether or not those gaps are going to be bridged, whether certain conversations are going to be had, because each of these characters in one way or another feels very lonely and cut off from the world, and that is embodied by the snowstorm that arrives to cut them all off from each other. Some of the writing in this is so beautiful. I have some quotes here that I just could not help but copy down. So the farmer is holding his bull on a rope. It says, "It's as if he were holding a planet on a kite string. The bull stood with its blackness bleeding into the air, unmoving as if swallowed by its own mythology." I mean, come on. "The bull was balanced on its slender legs like a grand piano." Oh, I can pick so good. Okay, so there's lots of things like that. The day already had the character of a memory. I adored that too. Loved the writing, and I did think that if you are a fan of If Nobody Speaks of Remarkable Things by John McGregor, you would absolutely adore this book, looking at the little moments that people experience in their everyday lives, which may be inconsequential to everybody else, but are really important to them on some level. Yes, that would be my, if you like this, you should read this recommendation. The bull has this ominous presence throughout the book. That was very effective. I just felt very threatened by it whenever it was on the page. And it also reminded me, I'm just checking my notes here, I was also reminded of Winter by Ali Smith, this idea of a world being frozen in time, of you feeling like you can't escape certain situations in your life. There is some rudimentary discussion on racism and systemic injustice in this book. I'm not sure how effective that was as I was reading it, but attempts, I suppose, were made. And that's linked in with imagery to do with cinematography and people behind the scenes. There's lots of images to do with snow, things snowballing, getting bigger, gathering momentum, plots moving faster. Obviously imagery to do with snowballs getting bigger and pregnant bellies, and at one point the two pregnant women actually do create a snowman in the field between their houses. But also snow, if we think about television and the snow that you used to get if you were turning off your television before it goes blank, or if you're stuck between two channels. This feeling as though you are in the in-between time before your life, the spring, is going to kickstart something. So waiting for this baby to arrive, or waiting for something else that is going to change the fortune of your existence. Overall, I liked the book a lot. I was, as I said, very moved by it, and I could see myself recommending it to lots of people. Excellent work, lovely. And then I read Misinterpretation by Ledia Xhoga, and this is one of those books that I enjoyed thinking about more than I enjoyed reading, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We love a book that challenges us, that makes us think. But like with Flashlight, I was reminded of a book that I read a couple of years ago that does similar things, which I think is better, which is frustrating because I just then couldn't connect with this book as much as I wanted to. Just pausing here because I'm editing this clip and realised I never actually said what that book was. So that book was Untold Night and Day by Bae Suah, which is set in Korea and is about translation and cinematography, secrets and mysterious people, and it's also a tiny bit of a thriller, I suppose, but the writing is gorgeous, and definitely a lot about misinterpreting things and uncertainty, and I would highly recommend reading it. This novel is about an Albanian translator, a woman who is unnamed, living in New York, and her husband is wanting her to stop doing as much interpretation work as she has been doing because he doesn't think that it's good for her. And as we start to spend time with her, we realise it's because she becomes entangled in the lives of the people that she works with. She is told time and time again that the rule book of translation means that if you are translating for a person and their life reflects yours and it changes the way you want to voice what they're saying, then you should step back from this job. You shouldn't do it because you shouldn't insert yourself into their narrative. It isn't about you. You are just supposed to be a complete blank slate. You are supposed to be regurgitating things. You are not supposed to be taking them on and reinterpreting them and then projecting them outwards on behalf of somebody else, which is an interesting commentary on translation in general, because if we're thinking about the translation of books, a translator is an author kind of, well, not even kind of, they are an author themselves. They are thinking of the best way that they can get across the point of this author, but in a language that that author doesn't probably write in a way that would reflect the tone of the original text, but would also appeal to the readers of the language that it is being translated into. And a few years ago, I did an interview with Polly Barton, who is a translator of Japanese work, and we were talking about how translation is like being the midwife of a text, and she had lots of really interesting things to say. And she's also written a book called 50 Sounds, which is a non-fiction book about the translation process. Anyway, I was having lots of thoughts about all of this when reading this book, and that's what this book would like you to think about. What is the role of translation? What is our role when we help people? How involved should we be in other people's lives in both a professional and a social sense? Ooh, that alarm has stopped now. To reflect the way that the interpreter internalizes and projects when she's working with other people, we see this overlay of her thoughts. So if Alfred, in this case, which is a man she is translating for, she goes with him at first to the dentist, she's translating for him, and we get part of what he's saying, but then that will make her think about something from her childhood. So we'll then get a memory inserted where she is reflecting on that. It's like a photograph that has a double exposure. You get these different layers, and then we will also get memories to contextualize the present. And this interjection means that it changes the pace of the book. It interrupts the narrative. It makes things feel like they are being stalled, which is what the translation interpretation process is like, because you're waiting for someone to finish talking so that you can repeat what they're saying, and that interrupts their flow. I thought that was all very interesting and somewhat effective, but I suppose overall, if you're creating a narrative that keeps stalling and meandering and going off in different directions to reflect the character's state of mind, but also the act of interpreting, it doesn't make for the most compelling read, because you feel like you're stopping and starting all the time, that you're never really getting to the grips of this story because other stories keep interrupting it. There's some fun wordplay in here. At one point, Alfred said, "I used to read Greek mythology when I was younger. He's a three-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld to prevent the dead from leaving. Where are the dead going? To spy on the living. This was a joke, it turned out." He grimaced, revealing a gap between his teeth where the left canine used to be. So we're talking about dogs, and then we talk about canine teeth. And there were little nods like that throughout, which I thought were fun to notice. There's some drama in this book, and I did say at the beginning that this was a thriller because it says on the back it is an emotional thriller. And part of this book is a thriller. I would have liked more thriller, I think. It also felt a little bit, I'm going to say, soggy in the middle. I feel like there was a section in this book, a middle section, that probably could have just been chopped. Had a similar feeling to Flashlight in that respect. But yeah, it probes at lots of different things. It made me think lots of different thoughts. But did I love it in the pit of my stomach, in my soul? Not really. I could still see it making my top 6 though, just because I keep thinking about it in an analytical kind of way. I suppose it just begs the question, what do we want from a book? Do we want to fall in love with it? Do we want to be thinking about it in a frustrated but also slightly enamoured kind of way? I don't know. What do we want? I want different things from different books on different days. That's probably not a very helpful answer. Anyway, I will check back in with you when I've read some more. Hi, today's find, not a roadside find, but a woodland find, is one I actually can't now find. I'm looking around my office as though it's going to miraculously reveal itself, and I wanted to show you because it's so pretty. We found a parakeet tail feather. If you're not familiar, parakeets are very, very common in London now, and I think probably outside of the city as well. You can find them in neighbouring counties. Maybe they've even gone further afield. This is a relatively recent thing. I remember being on Hampstead Heath maybe 10 years ago, and there was a woman in a panic trying to call the Society for the Preservation of Birds because she thought that a parrot had escaped someone's home. But no, parakeets are just out and about in the wild. Anyway, this feather is really beautiful. I was going to show you, but it's gone now. Maybe I will insert a picture here so you can see all beautiful greens and blues. How lovely. Anyway, so that is my anecdote for today. I'm here to talk to you about 3 books right now, and I think 2 of them have really interesting conversations with each other, and those 2 are Universality by Natasha Brown and The Rest of Our Lives by Ben Markovits. Now, I read Ben's book first, and this is a novel about a man called Tom who quite a long time ago discovered that his wife was having an affair. This affair is now over, and at the time he promised her that he wouldn't leave her until their daughter turned 18. He's now, as this novel begins, about to drop Miriam off at college, and he's asking himself, am I really going to do this? Am I going to leave my wife? Am I going to get in my car and just drive off and not come back? And what does that look like? And who would I be? Who am I anyway? Tom is a very frustrating character to have to spend lots of time with, because he is a disgruntled middle-aged white man who thinks that the world believes he is redundant and useless, and you feel that yourself as you're reading this book. You're thinking, for goodness sake, Tom, go away. Can you please find someone more interesting for me to spend time with? And I wonder if that's kind of the point of the book, that you want him to go away, that you want him to just be quiet, because most of what he says is insufferable. There are a few instances that are funny, and I did mark those. Let me just get those up. Oh yeah, so he says at one point that their son likes to come home to fix things so that he can leave again, which I thought, just some of the family observations are very accurate, I want to say. This is about his wife. It was a gentle reminder of what her personality used to be like before being slowly eroded by long association with me. That really did tickle me. But anyway, so Tom associates himself with racists. He probably wouldn't say he was a racist himself, but that's because he has no conviction about anything. He is slippery. He likes to just make, in inverted commas, heavy inverted commas, jokes that he can wriggle out from under if the people around him become too uncomfortable, and say, hey, you need to learn to lighten up a little bit. I think this book is asking us what happens if someone like this just gets in their car, metaphorically and physically, and just keeps driving, doesn't veer off, doesn't stop to have meaningful conversations with people, doesn't think about where they'll end up if they don't change themselves, and without spoiling, where they end up is not anywhere good. So I thought this book was very readable. I didn't feel a huge amount else about it. I think part of that is because I wasn't really sure who the book is for. I'm still thinking about that. I would love to know what your thoughts are on the audience of this book in a comment down below. Please do tell me. And yeah, Universality by Natasha Brown definitely, as I said, has comparisons to this one. This is a book that I actually preferred to her debut novel, Assembly. We open with a journalist's account of someone called Jake who hit a man over the head with this gold bar here. And you're not sure who is writing the piece at first, and that is actually what is interesting. I think as the book evolves and we get to spend more time with different characters in each section, I was forcing myself to stop and ask, wait, who is writing this particular section? What is their agenda? What do they want us to think about these particular events? Which is obviously very meta, because this overall is written by Natasha Brown, but you have lots of different authors within these pages, and they're all out to get their point across in various different ways. I thought that the meta-ness of this book was the most interesting thing about it. So who benefits from telling certain stories? Who literally profits from interviewing people who have suffered in one way or another? Or who benefits from being an absolute arse, I suppose? Who benefits from being someone who says outrageous and horrible and offensive things and claims that they hate, in inverted commas, woke culture, but that actually pays their bills in the end? There's a character in this called Lenny who is one of the authors within this book, and I'm pretty sure that this person is supposed to be, or is at least heavily inspired by, Lionel Shriver. The end section of the book is Lenny being interviewed at a literary festival, and in 2018 I was at Cheltenham Literary Festival, as I used to be many years pre-pandemic, and I was doing events for my own books, but I was also interviewing I think Olivia Laing and Kieran Millward-Hargrave, and I remember being in the green room when Lionel Shriver's event was going on in the big room opposite, and people were leaving the event because she was saying such horrendous things, and people leaving was saying that she was basically making the interviewer cry. And this, I feel, must pull very heavily on that. But as I'm saying that, I think there are so many outrageous people out there saying horrible things that there are a plethora of people that Lenny could be inspired by, and is actually probably just a Frankenstein's monster of all of those people. But Frankenstein's monster, I think, is quite apt when we're talking about this book, which is a jigsawed narrative of various different accounts. And this character of Lenny is someone who is being supported by hatred. I did find this book quite heavy-handed in parts, but I also think that is deliberate on the part of the author. I mean, look at the cover here and look at what we open with as someone being hit over the head with a gold bar. They're being hit over the head with capitalism, and Natasha Brown is hitting us over the head with all of the on-the-nose stuff that's going on in this book to remind us, as the blurb says, remember, words are your weapons, they're your tools, your currency. And I think it's always a good reminder to think critically about what we're reading, who is writing it and why, what is their agenda. And I think maybe especially poignant with the rise of AI, like, is the writing that you're reading written by a human or not? And if not, what is this bot trying to get you to do? Are they getting you to sign up for something? Are they trying to recruit you for some kind of idea? Do they want your money? Do they want your data? They definitely want your data. So I do think there are interesting thoughts to be had about this book, but I wouldn't say I loved the overall reading experience. And I have basically the opposite thought about Love Forms by Claire Adam. I really enjoyed reading this book. I found it ever so readable, but I don't have lots of thoughts about it now that I have finished it. I thought the book was solidly good. I could press it into the hands of most people. Maybe it's the book I've read so far that I think would appeal to the most people, but it's not going to be, I think, my favourite from the list. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I did not enjoy her debut novel, which was called The Golden Child, I think. I didn't gel with that one at all. But this one, I thought the voice was so strong and lyrical. In this, we're following Dawn. She grew up in Trinidad in the 1980s, and when she was 16, she became pregnant, and her parents sent her to Venezuela to live in a nunnery, in a convent, and to give birth and then give up her child for adoption. Many, many decades later, she's now living in London, and she's been trying to track down her daughter. She's since had a family, and she's been very open with them about the fact that she gave up her daughter. And I loved that about this book. I loved how she was rewriting, changing the family tradition that her family have of keeping secrets, of not speaking to each other, of crushing everything down. She wants to break free from all of that. I found the openness in this book so refreshing, because I think so often a novel can rely on characters' secrets and people not talking to each other properly to create tension, which is obviously very effective, but I think can become quite tiresome. So yeah, I just liked the way that Dawn handled herself. There's also a delightful mothering that's going on in this book, as if Dawn is trying to take care of us as the reader and make sure that we really understand what's going on. So she will describe parts of her childhood and traditions that she and her family had, and at the same time she will then explain things that she had to discover in London. So she explains to the reader what a terraced house is, in case they aren't familiar with that. So it's as if she's trying to reach all readers everywhere and fill in every gap of knowledge that they might have. And I think that's because it's almost like she's writing it for the child that she gave up, and she has no idea what they're like, or whether they ended up growing up in Trinidad, or whether they are in London, and she doesn't know what their knowledge of the world is. So she wants to cover all bases, and that is never explicitly said in the book. It was just something I was thinking about afterwards and I thought was really lovely. The end of this book made me sob, and I don't want to think about it too much because I'll just cry again. I thought this was a very human book. It made me feel things. I thought it was executed very, very well. I think I tend to prefer books that are a little rough around the edges, that are pushing boundaries or playing with themes in ways that are a little bit off kilter, and I didn't feel like this book did that. This is just a very good story, and that sounds so patronising. This is just a very good story. We all need a very good story, but there is a but. I don't know what the but is, but there isn't a barbedness about this story that I kind of longed for. And as I'm saying that, I realise it's incredibly unfair, but it's just how I feel. Do with that what you will. Okay, I will check back in with you when I've read some more. Hello, it has been a little while because I had to take a break from Booker Prize reading to do some editorial work reading Theodora's Tea Shop by Chrissy Ann Jones. You may know Chrissy because she also has a YouTube channel, and her debut novel is being published by Hachette next year. And yeah, I was doing some work on this, and it is a 120,000 word fantasy novel, which is not the kind of book that I normally gravitate towards in my everyday life, but it was a joy to read. And yeah, I feel warm having read that book. So if you're not already aware of it or her channel, let me just put that on your radar, and I will link her in the description box down below. But anyway, I'm now back to Booker Prize reading, and hooray and hurrah, I have read 2 books that I have really, really enjoyed. So the first one is Seascraper by Benjamin Wood. This is, I think, the shortest out of all of them. It is only 160-ish pages. I think I said at the beginning that I thought this book was about the Thames. It's not about the Thames, Jen. Where did you get that from? That is capital city bias, right? This is a book that's set in a fictional town, but is somewhere in the northwest, and I was imagining like the Wirral when I was reading this book. And it's about a man called Tom who's only 20, but he feels much, much older than that because he does very grueling work going out every day in every kind of weather with his horse to scrape the beach for shrimp, which he takes back to shore and sells for not very much money. It is such an atmospheric book. And the way that I fell in love with this book is, I think, the way that a lot of other people fell in love with Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, which I appreciate as a novel, but I just didn't emotionally connect with for some reason or another. And weirdly, when I was reading Seascraper, even though I haven't seen the film of Small Things Like These with Cillian Murphy, I was imagining Cillian Murphy playing Tom, even though Tom is 20 and Cillian is not, though he is forever youthful, and Tom also looks older than he is. But that's who I had in my brain when I was reading this book. And then one day Tom comes across, or rather another person comes across him, a man called Edgar, who says he wants to hire Tom to show him the beach because he knows it like the back of his hand. He knows the safe areas, the not so safe areas, and Edgar really wants to create something. He has a vision to do with this beach, and he needs Tom's help. And that is all I will say about it from like a plot point of view, because obviously this is a very slight novel. Tom wants to be a musician, and there is a song that is included in this book, and you can listen to it. It's linked at the back, like you can go to the author's website. He's created this song, and excerpts of the song are littered throughout the book. And it was funny, I went to listen to the song at the end, and it was not what I imagined it to be at all. I was imagining it to be a sea shanty, and that's probably because we listened to a lot of sea shanties in our house. When our daughter was born, my husband learnt all these sea shanties and he would sing them to her all the time. We joke that we are probably the people who've listened to the most minutes of Sean Dagger, who is quite an obscure singer, I think. Mr. M came across him, I think he did the music for a computer game ages ago, some sea shanties. And yeah, we always have his music playing, but I'm not sure how many other people are listening to him. I will link a playlist of Sean Dagger in the description box down below. But yeah, I was just imagining that kind of sea shanty vibe, and that's actually not what the song is at all. And I suppose it was one of those instances where I almost wished I hadn't listened to the song at the end, because it differed so much from the song I had in my head. It's like when you see a film adaptation that doesn't quite line up with your vision, which is relevant to the themes in this book as well. Here are some things that I underlined. The sky is like a quarry's face, already much too dim for afternoon. The rain is still on the windscreen, soft as sugar for some reason. I quite like that one. That festering scent of bladderwrack, which lies along the foreshore here like clumps of hair upon a barber's floorboards. At one point we hear how Thomas's friends, who are also down on their luck, who also don't have much money at all, will go to the betting shop and will place money on horse races. And Thomas doesn't do that. He doesn't place bets on other people's horses. The bets that he places are on his own horse, and taking that horse out day in, day out to the beach. And his friends are wanting the world to offer them something, like a turnaround in fortune. And when Edgar turns up on his doorstep, Thomas wonders if this is his equivalent, if this is his bet on his horse paying off finally. This book also looks at art and inspiration and who ideas belong to, and the passing on of those ideas, and whether or not we can really lay claim to things that we create. I just overall thought this book was succinct. It did what it set out to do. It did it well. I was moved by it. It took me in a direction that I did not anticipate. I was shooketh. In a way, it reminded me a little bit of Muriel Sparks' writing. I love that. Yes, her books are also very short and brilliant. Anyway, I would recommend this one. It's my favourite from the list so far. And then the other one I want to talk about in this section is Audition by Katie Kitamura. This is a novel that is open to interpretation, and that is why it is so playful and fun whilst also probing at difficult topics and complex ideas. So we open with an unnamed narrator, a woman, a writer, and she's having lunch with a younger man called Xavier, and we're trying to work out what their relationship is with each other. And she thinks back on when other people have seen her having lunch or dinner with people and got the wrong end of the stick about her relationship with that person. So for instance, once she was having dinner with her dad, and the waiter thought that she was a sex worker and asked her to come and meet him after she had finished with her client, but she was just out for dinner with her dad. And she says how people will make certain assumptions about you based on your gender and your race. And Xavier is there because he thinks that maybe she is his long lost mother. She is a writer, and she once was quoted saying in an interview that she had previously lost a child. What she'd actually said when she was being interviewed was that she had had an abortion, but the interviewer was uncomfortable with that and so rephrased that as having lost a child. Xavier read that in an interview and thought that she'd given a child up for adoption. He was adopted. He wants to find out if she is his mother, which is quite a bold thing to do, really. It's not really based on anything apart from their age and also their race. So because she is the right age, and because Xavier thinks that they kind of look similar, she can fulfill that role for him, which taps into conversations that this book is having about what roles are open to actors, especially women, and women who are not white of a certain age. Like, what box will you be placed into? What space will you be allowed to take up when it comes to stories that are being told? Anyway, so our narrator tells Xavier, I can't possibly be your mother. I've never had a child, so I mean, what are we to each other now? Where do we go from here? Because this feels like a little bit of a dead end. And then the entire novel flips and turns into something else. It's almost like you're reading two different realities, or perhaps you are reading a play that one of the characters is writing, and perhaps one part of this book is supposed to be their real selves and one is supposed to be the play that they are putting on, or maybe both of them are fictional pieces and you never really get to know the characters at all. That may sound a bit vague, but I can't really talk about it without spoiling it, and this book is so much fun. I would kind of just like you to dive into it, and I would love to know what you thought about it in the comment section down below if you have read it. I thought it was a ride. There were three things that I was reminded of when I read this book. I was reminded of The Seer by Ali Smith, which is a play that I think is out of print. It's my favourite play of all time. I mean, you know that I love Ali Smith, but this play is just so funny. It's about a couple in their home, and they are so bored and sick of each other that when a woman rocks up on their doorstep claiming to be the woman's sister, they don't want to talk to each other, so they allow her to come in and they pretend that they know her, they pretend that they've invited her to stay, and it just unravels into this completely breaking down the fourth wall ridiculousness. It's so good. I was also reminded of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee, which is another very famous play, that one, which is about a couple who invent a son to kind of make themselves more interesting at a dinner party when they're hosting, and they're both coming up with alternate realities for this son that they do not have, and it's equally outrageous. The thing I couldn't really escape when I was reading this book though is I thought Katie Kitamura must have watched and loved the first season of The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder. I mean, that's called The Rehearsal and this is called Audition. I would bet money, unlike Thomas from Seascraper, who doesn't bet. To be honest, I've never placed a bet either, but if one could bet money on such things, I would bet that she had watched The Rehearsal. If you have watched The Rehearsal, then you will have some kind of idea about how unhinged this book is. The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder, how do you even explain it? I don't even know if you can explain it, but the first season is about him creating scenarios where people can rehearse difficult conversations that they have to have with real people in their lives by having actors embody that person, and it goes to ridiculous extremes. If you haven't watched it, go watch it, because it is brilliant and kind of a little bit like Synecdoche, New York. That it has that feeling to it. Anyway, without removing myself too far from this book by recommending lots of different things, I thought this book was really funny and also interesting, thought-provoking. I'm going to give another thing that it reminded me of. It reminded me a little bit of The Father, the film with Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman, which I think was initially a play, which manipulates the environment the characters live in to reflect one of the characters' dementia. And the way that the flat in this book is described really makes it feel like a stage. At one point all the lights are on and everything is really hot, like stage lighting is on all of them, and everything is being shown to the audience, but you're not sure what highlighted thing you're supposed to be paying the most attention to because everything is so loud. Yeah, this book I know will divide people and has divided people because it's a bit out there, but I really enjoyed that very much. So how many books do I have left? I think I have 3. I think I have 3 books left, so I will come back to you when I have read them. Hi! I feel like we haven't really moved much from this chair that I'm sitting in, have we? But I promise much time has passed, and I do actually exist in other rooms apart from this one. The lovely Ben sent back my copy of The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny and included this gorgeous bookmark, so thank you, Ben. I've obviously actually thanked him properly, not just here. And I finished reading the last 3 books with a caveat, which we will get to. So let us dive in. This book, it turns out, is not toddler proof. It may have been slightly chewed. Do excuse. So this is One Boat by Jonathan Buckley. I would say this is the book on the list that I felt probably the most ambivalent about. This is about a woman who is revisiting a place in Greece in 2 different timelines but very similar circumstances. She went there once when her father died, once when her mother died, and when she's there she's documenting her feelings and then reading over those feelings. It's like she's building her own character, like she is creating herself. What she thinks becomes reality. So it's quite meta, but I do feel things like Audition and Misinterpretation are exploring similar ideas but doing those things better. I also didn't really believe in this character. I didn't believe her as a female narrator, but tongue-in-cheek, that is discussed in this book about the believability of characters and about the believability of characters you have written who exist with experience that you have not experienced yourself. So I guess that was kind of the point, but it didn't really make me care about her anymore. Yeah, this is not my favourite. I was reminded of Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. I would say the writing style is quite similar, so if you like that one then maybe you will enjoy this. I then read Endling by Maria Reva, and this is also a book that I left feeling a little bit deflated. I think because a lot of people I've heard, you know, rumblings in the background. I've heard lots of people say that this is their favourite book from this list, so I was hoping to really, really love it, and I just didn't gel with it as much as I had hoped. And I think that's because it's quite funny, and if you don't really gel with the book's sense of humour, then you're not going to ultimately love it. And I would compare it to titles such as The Idiot by Elif Batuman and also The Dog of the North. Who wrote that? I have forgotten. Elizabeth Mackenzie, and that was a book that was on the Women's Prize Longlist a couple of years ago, and which I did enjoy, but it didn't end up being one of my favourites. So, what is this book about? It is about a woman who is very depressed, feeling lost. She has been trying to save endlings, so snails. Endlings are the last creature of a species. So she has this camper van, well, it is a lab on wheels, where she has been collecting and trying to save snails that are about to go extinct. And she's doing this in Ukraine, and then Ukraine has a new invasion by Russia, and that interrupts her process. And it also interrupts Maria Reva writing this novel. So not that far into the book, we get an interruption in the narrative where the author comes in and is kind of talking about the pointlessness of creating art in terrible times. Like, what is this book going to be? And she's promised her publisher that she's going to write a novel, and now she doesn't really know what this book should say, what it should be attempting to do, and it all feels a bit pointless, which obviously reflects this character's job of trying to save these snails who she feels don't want to be saved as the world burns anyway. This character, Yeva, is just despairing at everything. And then she gets the opportunity to try and make a difference, make a political statement, which is what writers are thinking about all the time when they're creating work. Like, what statements are they making? Like, what is the purpose of the art that they are creating? What is the message? What good is art doing? The author includes some autobiographical stuff about her own family, and she's thinking about whether or not that's actually her story to tell, and is this an abuse of power almost by including it? At one point, a film crew interrupts the story within the story to talk about their own story. So like with Audition by Katie Kitamura, we've got all these layers of performance, and also talking about the performative nature of some kinds of activism and whether or not that's actually a helpful thing to say. I did feel like maybe this book was trying to be really smart, and that's maybe why I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. It also feels very messy, but it's a self-proclaimed mess, because this is a frustrated cry about how do we create art in the end times? What is the point? What are we doing? It's about rewriting endings. Can we rewrite endings? Can we save ourselves? Can literature save us? A thought. Also did laugh at the fact that at one point the Maria Reva in this book says that her publisher wants her to write a Booker Prize winning book, and she doesn't know how to do that, and now she's on the Booker Prize longlist. So there we go. And then finally, as I said, Ben has sent me back. That wasn't a good sentence. Ben has sent this back to me, which is The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai. Now, this is a book that is over 700 pages, which I don't mind. I love, like, I adore a long book I can lose myself in, but the font is tiny. I have scratch corneas. This is a very heavy book, and I have arthritis. I have read 100 pages of it, and I feel like that's enough to kind of give you an idea of what I feel about it, especially because this book is not out yet, and also enough to know that if this book is shortlisted, or maybe I will do this anyway, I will be listening to the audiobook of this, but the audiobook is not out because the book is not out and the ebook is not available for me. I only have this. So this is the only format I could read it in, and I had to weigh up the pros and cons of how much I was enjoying this book versus the physical pain I was in while reading it, and I just thought it wasn't worth reading over 700 pages in this form. So I may come back to it in audiobook. Anyway, this is what promises to be an epic tale across, I think, 20 years. Initial thoughts on the book. I think that it is rich and lyrical. I'm reminded of epic things like Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And again, I suppose something like Demon Cophead by Barbara Kingsolver. Something where you follow characters for a really, really long time. Like Fatima Farhin Mirza's A Place for Us, which I think also spans 20 years. We are following Sonia and Sunny and their families. Their grandparents once tried to bring them together. So that's what we open with, is with grandparents interfering in their families' lives. Sonia has moved from India to America. She's feeling really lonely at this university where she's doing creative writing. She has got involved with a man who isn't treating her that nicely. We can see that very clearly as readers. She hasn't quite allowed herself to admit that yet, and he's telling her what she should or shouldn't write about. He tells her that she shouldn't write about Indian folktales, she shouldn't write about arranged marriage, because those are cliches that American publishing companies would like to push when it comes to Indian narratives. So it's quite tongue-in-cheek, because we're opening with a discussion of potential arranged marriage between these characters. So yeah, the sentences are gorgeous. Some of the writing I haven't enjoyed so much. So at one point, Sonia's talking about how she's crying and she can't stop crying, and she links that with diarrhea, and I just was really thrown by that. It's not an image I expected to read, to be honest. But for the most part, the writing is beautiful. Like, here is a paragraph that I underlined. It then lifted up a piece of nigiri that smelled of the sea and popped it into her mouth. One of Sonia's cheeks was singed from the cold from the pane of glass on one side of the table, and the other cheek felt almost liquid in the heat of the nearby fireplace. The heat melted and curled like molten oil into her ear, and she was seduced by the golden phoenix sparking and hissing up the chimney, the grove of bamboo beyond the window, little leaves each covered with a slip of snow, bowing deep to the hush. I mean, come on. So you can picture every scene, but that's also my slight issue with this book, is that the descriptions are long, and it slows down the pace of the book in a way that I find quite distracting. So if we are introduced to a character, not even in person, but if a character sees a photograph of another character, we will then be immediately told what that character looks like, everything they're wearing, and a bit about their history. It reminded me of Kay Tempest's book, The Bricks That Built the Houses, where every time you found someone, you would delve back and find some backstory, which meant that the momentum of the book was rocky. And it's a deliberate choice that the author has made to do this. I think I would have liked some darlings to have been killed, though it feels a little bit overindulgent in places. But that's also probably just my personal taste. I quite like spiky, sharp, to the point writing. I do enjoy gorgeous descriptions here and there, but when every paragraph is super heavy, I then also start to feel heavy. So I am liking the book and I'm enjoying it, but I also have some reservations about it as well. But I look forward to listening to the book in the future and seeing if it's going to sweep me off my feet. So those are my thoughts on the 13 books. Let me kind of put these books into some kind of order. Okay, this is how I feel today. On any other day, the order might be different. So I'm going to go from least favourite to favourite. So we've got One Boat by Jonathan Buckley. This was my least favourite, followed by The South by Tash Aw. Then Endling by Reva. Excuse my phone falling on the floor. Then we've got Flesh by David Szalay, followed by The Rest of Our Lives by Ben Markovits. Then Universality by Natasha Brown. And then Love Forms by Claire Adam, which could potentially be my number 6, so could make my personal shortlist, but I've put as a placeholder at number 6 The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai, because I think I could end up loving this one, but obviously I haven't finished it yet. So this is a tentative 6th place. I would be shocked if this one didn't make the shortlist. I really would be shocked. I mean, I know I haven't finished it, but just from the prose that I've read so far, I would be surprised. Then we've got Misinterpretation by Ledia Xhoga, which, as I said, is not a book that I ended up loving in my soul, but I've thought about it a lot and I have enjoyed thinking about it. Then we have got Flashlight by Susan Choi. Flawed, but did love. Lots to enjoy in this book. And then I think my top 3 are... There's a gap, I want to say, between the rest of the books and my top 3. These are definitely much higher up that list. So we've got The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller at number 3. Then at number 2, we've got Audition by Katie Kitamura. And then my number 1, I'm sure you probably guessed, is Seascraper by Benjamin Wood. So those are my thoughts. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you are new to my channel and you are not already subscribed, please do subscribe and stick around. And if you like the content that I put out on my channel and you would like to consider throwing $1 or £1 in the tip jar over on Patreon, that would be very appreciated. The support I receive over there allows me to keep creating free content on here, and there are some extra things over there like a book club, some behind the scenes stuff, and yeah, other things besides. I would love to know what books you have read from this year's longlist, or which books you hope to get maybe after you've heard me or other people talk about them. Let me know in a comment down below. I hope you're doing okay, and I will see you for another video in the not so distant future. Lots of love. Bye.